we were having coffee a year into working together. We were doing a review and he asked me, he's like, Zach, how do you plan to add value to the organization next year? And he just got quiet. I was frustrated. I'm like, well, aren't you supposed to tell me? For 10 years, people told me like, Zach, we need you to go over here. We need you. Will you be our VP of sales and help us train our, it was one chapter after another of people elevating me. And then here's Michael. What's your plan? How are you going to add value next year? And it just was like the most anxious, feeling. Like for the first time, I felt the weight of my own responsibility as a leader.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Zach Arend. Zach is a certified professional coach, coaching other entrepreneurial leaders to create more of what they want in their lives. He has coached, consulted, and facilitated more than 180 leadership sessions. He is the former vice president of sales for a $300 million logistics company, and he is a TED Talk speaker with his talk, Saddle Your Own Horse. You can learn more about Zach at zacharend.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Zach.
Zach, welcome to the Corporate Couch today.
Great to be here, Jeff.
You reached out to me on LinkedIn. God, I think it was like February of 2020. So right before, the world changed in March of 2020 with COVID. And a good friend of mine, Mike Allison, we were meeting. He said, I needed to meet you to be on the podcast. So we've had coffee and now here you are on the podcast. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, I was looking forward to this.
Yeah. So a big honor on the Corporate Couch, Zach. You're our first TED Talk person that has appeared. So we'll obviously talk about that. And I know we're going to be talking about saddling up our horses. So let's start with a fun question, Zach. So even people that know you fairly well, and you're pretty open, and you have your web page, and you talk a lot about yourself. But even that people know you fairly well, what one thing would surprise them about you?
Well, it's surprising how often people still don't see that I used to do rodeo. I mean, I do share it online, but so many people that have known me for years, they're like, you never told me that. So that's one. And then the other side of the coin, I played bass guitar in a rock band through high school and a little bit of college. So I can play a mean Metallica on the bass.
Right.
Most people don't know that about me.
Love that.
Yeah.
I had Sly James, a former mayor, one of the best mayors in Kansas City history, on, and that's what he said. He was in a rock band that opened for Jefferson Airplane, not Starship, Airplane.
That's
and
cool.
He's taking bass lessons now. So there you go. Yes, and not only your first TED Talk guest on the Corporate Couch, the first two-time state champion rodeo champion, bronc rider. So there you go. And we'll talk about that. So besides bronc riding growing up, what was fun for you? You grew up in a small town in Nebraska, right?
Yeah, I grew up in a small town in Nebraska, grew up in my mom and dad's grocery store, Arend's Family Foods. We probably had 800 people in our hometown.
Wow. You weren't born in one of the aisles or something, were you?
Pretty much. I was, no, but I was carrying out groceries probably at 11 years old. In the basement of the grocery store was a little, TV and a video game. Like we spent a lot of time in those early years at the grocery store when my mom and dad were getting that started.
Nice.
So that's a big part of my childhood. And then my mom, Lisa, she bought me my first horse when I was 8.
Wow.
And it was a Shetland pony named Princess. um, and she entered Princess and me in the 4-H. Like, it's like a horse club, 4-H in small town. And so we'd go to all these horse shows, competing for ribbons. And yeah, I didn't really want to do that, but mom was really into it. And so that's kind of where it all started growing up.
Yeah, and when we had coffee, I'm like, you look like you can still ride a little bit, do some bronco riding. I know it's tough. 8 seconds of hell, I guess.
Yeah, 8 seconds feels like an eternity for sure.
Obviously you were the 2-time state champion. Have you ever ridden a mechanical bull?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I love that. Funny story. My mom and dad took me to see the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. It's like the Super Bowl for rodeo. Every year in Vegas at the Thomas Mack Center.
Yes,
And
I've actually gone.
Seriously?
Yeah, I worked at Beringer Ingelheim, and
Okay.
The business units were by species. So we had companion animal, pets, dogs, cats, equine, horses, swine, and cattle, dairy and beef farms, production facilities, that type of thing. And the cattle team was meeting the sales team, and I was there, and we went to Thomas Mack, and I had never done it. PBR. It was fun. Juice Newton, she was a country singer back in the
Cool.
70s, 80s. She sang. I mean, it was cool. It was like, these people are badasses.
Well, yeah, and so how in Vegas they have these nice hotels, and whenever an event's in town, it kind of consumes parts of Vegas. Well, the rodeo naturally, you see all these cowboy booths, cowboy hats. Well, on our way out, they were doing a mechanical bull riding contest in the hotel we were staying at, and I don't remember the name, but it was they were doing a contest, and I was probably 14 years old, and everybody else was like adults. They were messing around, drinking their beers.
Adults. They were drunk adults.
You're right. And I wasn't. I was 14. And so I got up on there. I entered in, and I got up on the thing, and they turn it on. It's kind of like a rocking chair, up, down, up, down. And I kind of look at the guy. I'm like, let's go, and he turns it up, and I wrote it, and ended up like, people were like applauding, and I'm just like this 14-year-old kid. They didn't see that coming, but it was that's a special memory I have with the mechanical bull.
There you go.
That was a fun night. Yeah.
Love it. Yeah. That was post Urban Cowboy with John Travolta. Yeah. So you were in high school when you won the state championship in bronc riding?
Yeah. So I grew up riding horses, started with Princess, but then eventually I started doing roping. I did county fair rodeos, but then I was probably a freshman in high school, and I saw the bronc riding event. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. And so I went and told my mom, I'm like, can I do that? And so she gets me a coach, and I'm learning how to ride saddle broncs. For 2 years, I just did nothing but hit the ground. I mean, hit the ground hundreds of times. I broke bones. And for 2 years, I did not qualify. I didn't have a qualifying ride. And then it was a hot summer day, and it was just Thunderstruck from AC/DC's playing, one of the favorite parts of the rodeo, the soundtracks of those rodeos. So cool. And I got on the back of this horse, I nod my head, and the gate opens, and it was like slow motion. Something just clicked in me, and I was in perfect timing with the horse. I rode it all the way to the buzzer, crowds applauding, and my mom, she was the most excited person in the stands. Everybody else is just kind of giving me a golf clap, but she's on her feet, just hands in the air, because I did it. And I went on from there. I went on to become 2-time state champion. So it was just kind of a process of, my coach often told me, he's like, Zach, you're just going to have to keep getting back on. Like this doesn't happen overnight. You got to stay with this process. Yeah. I just trusted his coaching and stayed at it, and it clicked. Earned a full ride scholarship to Fort Scott Community College, which is just south of Kansas City. Okay. So I went in, I rode in the collegiate level for a little while, and then I met a girl, and it's like, well, maybe I should settle down. I moved to Kansas City, and then a whole new life began. Like, I haven't been on a horse really for decades. I mean, I still wear cowboy boots, but I don't really ride horses anymore. We live in the city, so
yeah. I could see you a guest appearance on Yellowstone. I could definitely say it.
Oh, that was a great show, wasn't it? I love that show.
And it's supposedly coming back. I don't know when, 2028, 27, I don't know.
I didn't hear
um,
that.
so,
Interesting.
so growing up was like being a professional, you know, rider. What was your aspiration, or what was your aspiration?
I think I was figuring that out. I mean, looking back, we were watching home video over Christmas last year, and we dusted off some of the old rodeo tapes, and I just saw this like young boy standing behind the chutes doing some crazy stuff, and it's all I knew, and that's what I did, and I wanted to be great at it, and for sure, like we knew all the guys competing at the professional level, and dreamt of being like the world champion, and um it was just a lifestyle. I mean, it consumed everything I did. Like I was constantly going to the next rodeo or going to practice or doing some drills in the backyard. Um, so yeah, it was a lot of my identity was wrapped up in that
Sure.
growing up.
So you go to Fort Scott, continue on, you're doing what you love at a collegiate level. You meet a girl, you go to Kansas City, and it looked like you started UPS probably, in the ops in
Yeah.
the, at Lenexa, I know has a big facility here, Lenexa, Kansas. But did you go to school like not full time or nights? I mean, it looked like
Yeah.
you overlap between UPS
Oh
and
yeah.
your UMKC.
Well, it started in Fort Scott and it was more of a rodeo scholarship. I was bored at a school level though. Like I ended up transferring up to Johnson County Community College and there was this 2-year program to learn how to do like networking and computers like that. I did not want to go to school. I was ready to be done. And so that 2-year certificate and then you can get a real job was like, I want to do that. And along the same time, I started working at UPS evenings, which is like a part-time 5 hours a day, and I quickly got promoted there. And usually you get promoted as a trainer, and they didn't do that. They just gave me a whole area of the building to run. I had 16 people reporting to me. I'm like 2 years into college, and I absolutely loved it. I'm like, this is fun. It was a rush. It was just like, I loved it. And I did well. And so I got to the point where I'm like, I want to go into operations or business. So I'm almost done with my 2-year thing. And I call home and tell mom and dad, I'm like, yeah, I think I want to go to school and get a business degree. And dad's like, what? You're almost done with this. You got one semester left. He's like, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore. And
Right.
which, there's money invested that's just kind of gone. But
Right.
I'm thankful that I didn't let that stop me. And so I went, finished up some stuff at Johnson County, and then went to UMKC and got my business degree. I often skipped class. I wanted to work extra shifts at UPS. I just loved it. I was working
Yeah.
the twilight shift, the evening, night shift. I absolutely loved it.
Actually, my nephew works for them right now, but back then it seemed to have a great culture. I told you when we had coffee, a friend of mine, one of my brother's best friends, Sal Messina, ran that operation for a long time. So he started UPS way back when, but then he got a promotion to come out here and run Lenexa. And I was between jobs, and I literally thought about working for UPS in the
Yeah.
operations center, just hauling boxes and putting them on conveyor belts. And I went through the orientation, not for like, if, not new hire orientation, but kind of orientation if you wanted to work there. But it, had great benefits, and it seemed,
Yeah.
like they had their
Yeah.
stuff together.
And they paid for school. I
Yeah, I
don't
was
know if
going to
they
ask
still
you.
do that, but yeah, that was a big reason is I kind of worked a deal with my parents, and they're like, if you work for them, we'll help you pay gas if you can help pay for school. And I'm like, game on, we'll do that. I'm working for UPS. So that's how it all got started, was the
Yeah.
tuition reimbursement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes. So you finished school, and I think you ended your run at UPS about the same time. So how did you get that? I think you went to a company, e-shipping, looked like you were in sales. Tell us about that.
Yeah.
How did you transition there? How did you get that job?
So I was 5-6 years at UPS, and I wanted to get promoted there because I was about ready to finish school and I wanted to go full time for UPS. That was the goal. And I went through the battery of tests, like the oral exam, the written exam, the personality stuff, and they said I didn't pass. And I'm like, this doesn't make sense to me. Like I'm literally getting asked to do, like I was running an area as if I was a full time, but I was doing it as a part. So I'm like, what? I'm doing the job, and I didn't pass, and they said I didn't pass the written part. And I just remember sitting across the table from that HR leader. I'm like, well, that's kind of subjective. Like, where exactly, what do you mean I didn't pass the written part? Like I didn't spell
Right.
some words correctly, or like, and I got a little like pissed about it. I was like, what the hell, And well, come to find out, somebody I used to work with there, he was a manager, so he was higher up. He told me years later, he's like, Zach, you were too much of an HR risk. I'm like, I was an HR risk. I was a little rough around the edges, I guess. And I just would say, what was on my mind. I would just, and I guess that's the story I'm telling myself. That's what I heard, is I was too much of an HR risk.
Well, were you a risk because, a lot of companies, they don't want people to think for themselves and,
Yeah.
if you look to do innovative things and, think outside the box. I mean, some companies don't want that.
There was some of that. Now, look, I was young, rough around the edges. I've learned a lot since then. But yeah, there was moments where my superior would tell me to do some checklist. And I remember like getting pissed. Like I said something like, an effing robot could do this job. Just follow the checklist. Like, I don't need to, I don't need to do this checklist. Like, get off my back.
It's great to be in your 20s, isn't it? Know everything.
Yeah. We'll just say I never said that again. But I had no filter. I would just say what I thought. And I'm actually now doing what I'm doing today. I'm learning to bring that back more because it serves some of the conversations I have with clients. But
I bet,
because I'm a little more mature now. But
and that was the first time you knew what insubordination meant in HR terms.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Well, I think he knew. I think he knew I was right. I didn't get written up. He just kind of, I don't know. I think he knew I was right.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was young. You're like the first person to ask me about the UPS days. And you asked me about e-shipping though. Sorry.
Yeah, no, just had it. Well, so you're like, you want to leave UPS now, it sounds, but yeah. Tell us
so I'm looking, I didn't have a plan. And so I'm like resume and I'm sending, and I'm like, I didn't even pay attention in college when they were telling me how to go get a job. Like, I don't know. I thought I had a job.
They don't really tell you that much, actually. But
right. Well, and so I'm just like, well, send out resumes. And I just would send the resumes out into the black hole and just nothing. And then one day I was sending resumes out, and I sent the resume out on the college job board. I went to their website, submitted it twice. And within 5 minutes, my phone rings, and it was Matt, who was he just got hired on. He was the COO of e-shipping at the time. And he's like, I got your resume twice. And because I sent it through different channels. And so we had an interview, and it was a commission job. It was sales, commission only, basically. I think I had a small salary, but it was ridiculous. It was very low.
Yeah. Like $1,000 a month.
But I loved it because it was like I had an opportunity to open up a territory in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I packed up and I moved to Tulsa and just started cold call sales. I did cold call sales. So every day I would knock on 20 doors in like these industrial parks. I would jump through the dock door because I needed to get to the shipping manager. I knew he was in the back. So I'm going to walk through the dock door. And that's how I was taught. And so I just, over those years of doing that, that was probably the best education I ever got.
Sure.
Of doing that cold call, like learning how to talk to people, because God knows I didn't know how to. I was so rough around the edges. I had no tact. I couldn't even talk to a nice lady behind the receptionist desk. I got all tongue twat, see, like that, tongue tied. But I had to learn, and I had to learn to do it in a way that didn't offend people, it didn't trigger them, because they don't want you in their business, So I had to learn to disarm people, and it was the best thing. I didn't know what I was getting into. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. Probably still to this day is the hardest thing I've ever done, learning how to cold call and talk to people.
Yeah.
But I'm so thankful that I went through that.
Sales is hard. Mm-hmm. And it, not the reason salespeople get paid, a lot more money than other functional areas is it's hard to do. And cold calling is the hardest part of sales. You have to get out of your comfort zone. I mean, there's no comfortable feeling of cold calling. Like there's people, no matter how long they've been in sales, and I think the longer you're in it, the worse it is, meaning like, if you're in sales for 15, 20 years and you can take a job where you have to cold call, people are like, oh, you got to be kidding.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I couldn't do it on the phone. I could do it in person though, because on the phone you can just you get hung up on, but in person like you kind of, they have to deal with me, you know, and I had to,
Right.
yeah. And I could connect. I learned to connect with people
Yeah.
through that. And so, yeah.
We won't go through every job, but I mean, it looks like, you start, ground floor sales position, you go to ops manager, director of client relation, and then VP of sales. Kind of
Yeah.
what was your learnings through that process? And we'll
Yeah.
get into the VP of sales role, but let's talk about how you got
Yeah.
there.
Just how I did everything. And like, honestly, how you, like, I was a little obsessive. Like, I was just like, I loved the job. I loved everything e-shipping stood for at the time. And I was like, started sales and was succeeding. And, me and another guy, his name's Ben. We were the only two like young guys out of college they hired. Everybody else had experience and they were kind of experimenting with this new way. Like, let's hire these guys out of college. They're hungry.
Yeah.
And we just did what we were told. Like, we went and made the calls. And
Yeah.
before we know it, we're one of the more successful offices. And so we're speaking at the conference, and
Oh, wow.
and then the business continues to evolve, and we open up an office together in Dallas, Texas. And that's where we really had to learn. So it was me and another guy, and in a way we started this office and we had to learn to work together, because we got to a point where we almost went completely opposite directions. Like, one of us had to go, whatever, like we almost got there. And it wasn't until somebody came in and helped us kind of parse apart what I'm strong at, what he's strong at, and learn to defer to one another and work together as a team, because there was a lot of egos involved. And I think that was an early lesson of like, oh, I can't do it all. Like, or and like learning how to like, let's set the ego aside and start to think about, what are we here to do together? What can I bring to the table? What can you bring to the table? And how do we do this together? And we started doing that. And I started gravitating more towards operations at the time, because the cold calling, which I was good at, it just wasn't as relevant in a big city like Dallas. It was too large.
Right.
The doors were locked, or in
Right.
Tulsa, it's like it's more like Kansas City.
Right.
And so I kind of stepped into more operations, leading the team, and he became the rock star salesperson. And so I had to like kind of learn through that, like, learned a lot of lessons there. But then fast forward, I am vice president of sales. I eventually become vice president of sales. I had a knack for teaching and training and coaching, which kind of is where it leads me on a path later on. But I had been with the company about 11 years. We had like 30 employees. We had grown to over 300 employees. And I'm sitting down to have a bourbon with my CEO at the country club. And he basically tells me, "Hey, Zach, I'm making some changes to the team." First time I kind of thought like, oh, I'm getting promoted again. This is cool. But then he's like, he ends up, this guy, Michael, who'd just been brought into the organization like 6 months ago. He's now vice president of sales. I'm demoted down to sales guy, like that. And
So you weren't even a sales leader. You didn't have people that you were responsible for. You were an individual contributor selling.
No, I was a vice president of sales leading the whole sales force.
No, I know. But when they demoted you, you just became
yes, that's right.
Wow.
Right. Which
wow.
I'm not here to like, that's not the point of the story. Is months go by and I get a review from Michael. We sit down and we're drinking another glass of bourbon. And he's like, "Zach, you're a good soldier. That's not leadership." He gave me feedback, and he was the most honest with me of all the people in my career. He was the first person. I'm 10 years into my career. He spoke truth to me. He's like, "Zach, you're a soldier. You'll run through walls for this company, but that's not what we need. We need a leader. Someone who's going to be thinking and strategic and willing to stand for what he believes in and not be a yes man and do whatever the team." Like, he helped me see how I was getting in my own way, because he gave me that. And it stung when I heard it, for sure. But looking back, I'm like, that's when things started to change for me. Because I set out on this journey of like, okay, what is leadership really? And eventually I become a coach, a consultant, and now I'm teaching leaders how to be better leaders. And I take that on full on. And that's what I do today, is work with organizations to, saddle your own horse. That's where it started. Michael started to ask me to take responsibility for my own career. Another story that was really, we were having coffee a year into working together. He just we were doing a review, and he asked me, he's like, "Zach, how do you plan to add value to the organization next year?" And he just got quiet. Like, I was frustrated. I'm like, "Well, aren't you supposed to tell me?" Like, because for 10 years, people told me like, Zach, we need you to go over here. We need you. Will you be our VP of sales and help us train our, it was one chapter after another of people elevating me. And then here's Michael. What's your plan? How are you going to add value next year? And it just was like the most anxious, like feeling, like for the first time, I felt the weight of my own responsibility as a leader.
Right.
And that's the very premise behind Saddle Your Own Horse, is putting yourself in a position where, realizing like nobody's coming. This is a creative endeavor, leadership, and creativity always starts from within. And it's not something that, it's not waiting on somebody else to tell you what you should do next. You can't lead from that place. And so I've built a whole body of work around this idea of saddle your own horse. And it started that day when I realized I was being the good soldier.
But okay, so you get this feedback. I mean, your VP of sales, you got to have what, 30, 50 people under your leadership at that time? I mean, I don't know how many sales reps, but I mean, you're responsible for, you were, 300 people. So
yeah, I had 30 direct reports. Yeah.
Yeah. So and so what do you do after you finish the bourbon, get in your car, you're driving home, you're like, I was a vice president and now I'm account executive or whatever the title of a, individual or sales rep.
Well, I mean, if I'm being honest, I literally fell apart.
Sure.
Literally, like it was in the afternoon, I think, actually. And I got in my car and I'm like, where do I go? Like, I don't want to go back to the office. I'm a wreck.
I would go to another bar. No,
that didn't enter my mind. I think I needed to go in and get something. And then I went home and then I called my best friend, Ben, I think I called him like soon after that. So Ben was the one we opened these offices together. Like we've been on this journey together. And I'm like, Ben, and I told him what happened. And oh man, yeah, he said, Zach, yeah, man, it's been kind of awkward watching you lead this last year. He said, it was like you're forcing it. So it's like, well, it's like, let's just pile on today.
Right.
But he said it with so much love. It was just like, yeah, like, and he kind of went on. He's like, Zach, you can't say you've been happy doing what you're doing. This isn't what you really want to do. He was so right. And he's like, and I just remember, he's like, Zach, why don't you just take a year and just do sales, do what you know, and just take the pressure off. Because I was trying so hard to be that great leader and please everyone around me. And he's just like, Zach, just take the pressure off. And I didn't want to hear it at the moment. Like, F that. I ain't take the pressure off. Like, that isn't who I am, but that's what I did. I landed and I just settled into my new role. Didn't do that the same night, then I went home and told my wife like, hey, I just got demoted, and had very similar questions. And then I had a coach too. I was working with an executive leadership coach, and the question, I kept saying like, I don't want to do sales. I don't want to do sales. And everybody was like, well, what do you want to do, Zach? What do you want to do? And then one day we were in front of the whiteboard at WeWork, and my coach just asked me like point blank, what do you want, Zach? Because I was going down the sob story, I don't know what I want. And what came out of me was, I want to be a thought leader. I want to be a coach. I want to help individuals like get people to move on their ideas. And, a lot of this was birthed from my own failure naturally.
Sure.
And so and he started writing this stuff on the board, and I just sat there like, oh shit, like there it is. But then that brought up all kinds of resistance because I had all kinds of stories of why I wasn't good enough to do that.
Right.
So I had to work through that, but that's a mini kind of what happened from there.
And you're still at eShipping at this point, right?
I'm still at eShipping. Yeah. And so I kind of, as I'm working through that, I made it, I was at a trade show doing sales. It was a solar trade show where I was trying to get into the solar industry. I didn't know a thing about solar, but I signed up for this golf tournament. I'm going to meet people in solar, and I'm going to walk around and meet people at the booths. And then I signed up for the networking events because, that's what I should do. I was miserable. Like I couldn't bring myself to walk into the cocktail thing, the networking thing. One day I was walking back to the hotel, and we staying in a nice hotel, it was in Vegas, I think it was. And I just like tears started just kind of welling up, just kind of this feeling of like, I don't want to do this shit anymore. Like as if somebody was making me do it. Right. But I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I went up to my hotel room. I skipped the networking event. Like, I'm just like, I'm not going. And I just started writing, what do you want, Zach? And I started journaling, like tears are dropping down on the journal. Like it was one of those moments where I'm like, what am I going to do? And then later that night, I called my wife, Shandy, and I'm like, babe, that coaching thing I've been talking about? That's what I want to do. And I signed up. I took some money we had set aside, probably money we were trying to save for a down payment on a home. And I invested in a coach training program, which was like an 8-month long journey. And I landed on, I'm going to become a coach and I'm going to do it while meeting my quota at e-shipping. I've been giving e-shipping everything I got, and I'm no more. I'm going to allocate 20, 30 hours a week to do e-shipping. And the rest of the time is going towards building my own business. And that was the first time I made the fundamental choice of build what I wanted to build. And I don't think you have to get to that point, but this is more about the spirit. This is when I became a leader, in a way. Now I'm taking it on. And I hit my quota that year, and I really was settling in my role. And that's when, but I was also adding coaching clients. And, I'd meet with them at 6 a.m. or in the evening. So you could call it a side hustle. But as I was starting to be a coach in the world, it started to attract new opportunities. And that's when North Point reached out. And I knew the guy that I used to go to school with, one of the leaders at North Point, and we went to dinner. And before I know it, he's recruiting me to come work for them as a coach, a leadership coach for them. And naturally, I said yes.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
Go back to e-shipping, just so you have this conversation, basically, get a big demotion, whatever you want to call it. It's pretty big. Do they even tell you, to demote you without having a plan to work on your leadership? Basically tells you that they don't want you to work there long term.
Well, right? I left this part out of the story, but over that glass of bourbon, I was on a phantom stock plan, right? I had and so
because it was privately held, right?
Yeah. And so he basically said, I'm gonna, instead of waiting 10 years for the payout, I'm gonna pay you $100,000 now. And so in the same conversation, I'm getting demoted. You have done a lot, and rather than waiting, you're young, here's $100,000. And I just remember saying, are you firing me? I felt like, is this a severance? Or he's like, no, you're a hell of a salesman. As long as you want to be here, you have a place here. Okay. And so that's kind of how we segued.
Okay.
In a way, I'm so it's weird, but it's he set me free.
Yeah.
And he kind of said that. If I remember, he's like, you're free.
Yeah.
He kind of acknowledged how much I've given and how committed I've been. And so there was all kinds of emotions, right, in the moment. Look, even anger. But looking now, I'm just so thankful for how it all happened. It just really shaped so much of what's happened since then. So I'm very grateful.
So that, not that it happened to me, but it makes me feel better, in terms of the, I always like to hear stories of great leadership, and that CEO actually gave you a gift, right? I mean, and it wasn't with you just didn't get demoted. He said he did the right thing. I'm going to turn your phantom stock options are now going to be yours. And basically said, he basically essentially told you, he set you free. But I mean, you knew based on your skill set, you can still, probably meet not only meet quota, probably exceed quota at 20, 30 hours a week and
Yes.
kind of build your business, which is phenomenal. Go get your certification, coaching certification, and things like that. So were you so you go to North Point, which is interesting because e-shipping, high growth company. North Point, when you went, probably was in the early stages of being kind of like the company, one of the great companies in Kansas City on a growth
Yeah.
trajectory. Um, were you doing full-time coaching there, or you had other
Yeah.
roles? Or okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So you were a W-2 employee. They did
I
just hire.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was working with the leadership teams, helping them do something with EOS. And so helping
Okay.
them, I was a self-implementer or
Okay.
internal implementer for them, helping them implement the EOS tools into their operating companies.
Okay.
But then it gave me a lot of opportunities I started to create some of my own training and my own material, like around coaching. And
Right.
so, like, one of the things I'm helping leaders do is teaching them how to create an environment where everyone saddles their own horse. And how can we as leaders show up more of a coach to our people, less of a parent, if you will, because
Right.
far too many leaders, we tend to rescue people
Right.
instead of inviting them to saddle their own horse, if you will. So
Yeah.
that's where it all began at North Point, because the culture there, I absolutely love that. Like, I am a huge fan. They have one of the best cultures, and it's not for everybody, for sure. It's not for everybody, but for those that are like wanting to have an environment where there's autonomy, and if you're willing to feel the weight of responsibility, like, that's what I noticed right away with North Point, the level of transparency, and then just the expectation of like greatness. Like, and it was like a demand, like in a way that brought out the best in people, though. It was really
Right.
cool. On the surface, you might get all offended, like, oh my God, can't believe they just said that, but the spirit in which everything was done, it was like I just saw right away. I'm like, this is a magical place, because the world needs this. The world needs to create environments where people take ownership, and just the culture that Nathaniel's built there. So it was an honor to. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from both leaders, from the e-shipping leader. Like, they really excelled at two different things, and bringing them together. Actually, this is the first time I said that out loud, but the e-shipping was so mission driven, values based when I was there, and still is. And right, there was just the heart. And then North Point was just the strong execution and personal responsibility. And you bring those together, and that's really at the heart and soul of what I do today and what I teach people. And it just
Yeah.
struck me, and like, oh, it's the blend of the two is where the greatness is.
When you went to North Point, did you say you're going to work there 3 years and then move on? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
because that I made a commitment to myself when I was demoted down to the sales guy. It's like, I'm building a coach. I am going to be a coach. Like, I'm going to learn to be a speaker. I'm going to lead workshops. Like, I'm coaching executives, leaders. Like, that's what I'm doing. Full stop. Like, there wasn't I hope this works. Like, it was like, I'm all in doing this.
Right.
And so it was within that context that I began my conversations with North Point, and I told them I'm not looking for a job. And they said, well, that's cool. Like, we need somebody like you. You could keep building your coaching business. And I just never came off it. I stayed committed. And part of that is they're like, but we do want to know you're going to be here for a while. Like, if you're just going to be for a year, that doesn't work for us. And I said, well, how much would you need me to agree to? And they said, well, at least more like 3 years. And I'm like, I can commit to 3 years. And long story short, 3 years happened really fast. I'm there for 3 years, and I'm like, well, it's 3 years, Zach. When are you going to go all in? And my business had continued to grow. But I'll be honest, I love North Point. It's a great culture. I'm like, can it get any better than this? This is where I'm like, well, I just stayed true to my, like, I'm a grow or die kind of mentality. Like,
Yeah.
I want to grow, and I see what's possible for me, and I can't let myself get comfortable. And I think I proactively went to them in like October and said, hey, January 1, it's time. My business is growing, and I need to do this. I need to step away. I need to go all in. And that happened last year, beginning of 2023, January.
Yeah. No, and again, North Point, a great example of a company that is willing to work with an employee to, people leave jobs, right? And people leave companies, but they knew they had a great talent in you, and it was, because a lot of companies, in their employee handbook says you cannot have a second job without approval from, your immediate supervisor or the VP of HR or the COO or the CEO, whatever it is. I mean, I've worked for those companies,
Yeah.
which to me is the craziest thing I can ever hear, because like you would fire anybody in a second, or you get acquired and people don't have jobs, but I'm going to rely on my total source of income with this company, and you won't
Yeah.
allow me to get a second job unless I hide it.
Yeah.
It makes no
Yeah.
sense to me.
And I don't know. Like mine was a unique situation in this context because I was coming in to coach the organization, and I knew, and we made this part of the discussion. Like I knew if I were to coach the organization the best of my ability, I couldn't be dependent. Like I couldn't feel like I need, because the second I'm like, well, I gotta, if they're not going to agree with me on this, if I'm going to say some stuff, because that's what a good coach does, is sometimes you say what's not popular and you shake things up and you help people see maybe what they don't want to see so that they can really address and move forward. And so I knew for me to be my best, I had to be willing and able to say what needed to be said without any like fear of, well, that fear was always there. Don't say it every one way, but knowing that I wasn't all in and being, so it was mutually beneficial for the both of us. It allowed me to be my best for them and allowed them, it was two-way, but
Yeah.
everything's so situational and outside of context. It's hard to say what's
Yeah.
right or wrong, but
Right.
yeah.
Let's get into your TED Talk. So at what point in your journey here, you said, I'm going to do a TED Talk?
Yeah. Well, it wasn't so clear like you saw it, I'm going to do it, let's do it. It was more of I like the idea of being somebody who has done a TED Talk. I think I have something to say, and it kind of evolved. And then I started speaking, and then I got around some people that were doing TED Talks, and then I actually found somebody who was hosting one, and she wanted me to try out. She's like, well, try, this is your dream. You told me you always wanted to do a TED Talk. You should try out. You should file an application. She like hounded me to do this. And I'm like, okay. And then I got declined. I didn't get accepted. And so I'm like, well, so moving on. I didn't like go to the, I just kind of,
do you have to
on.
submit a video of yourself talking? What is the application process?
They're kind of, I don't know if franchise is the right word, but they're licensed.
Yeah.
And so everybody has their own little bit of a process, but usually there's some sort of application process. So I didn't get in for one reason or another. And it wasn't like, well, I'll try again next year. It's just like, well, whatever. Like I was so focused on my coaching and my speaking that I could take the TED or leave it. I'm like, whatever, probably a month goes by and I'm in a event and we're sitting down at these tables and we're just sharing kind of what we're doing. And I actually started talking about this message of like the rodeo and the leadership stories I've learned from saddling your own horse. And I would like to find more stages to share that message. It's resonating with people. And I just shared that with the table of like 8 people. Well, that night there's a little cocktail networking event and she comes up to me with her partner and he starts talking to me and he's like, I wanted to invite you to my TEDx. We do one every year in Youngstown, and I wanted to give you a golden ticket. He called it a golden ticket. And he's like, we're going to get you a car to pick you up at the airport. We're going to pay for your hotel, your travel, and we're going to get you a coach. You're in. And I'm like waiting, like, what's the catch? Like I was waiting for like, how much is this going to cost? Do I have to pay to be in this TED? But he's like, no, you're in. You're in. There was no application process. I was in.
Wow.
And I'm like, and I don't know. I like that lesson for me because so often I try to make things happen.
Right.
And I'm learning more and more as I get older, like to let things happen, like let it happen and just be with what is a little bit more. Stop trying to make stuff happen and exhausting yourself. And I don't know, the more I seem to let go, the more things come into my life. And that sounds very spiritual.
Sure.
But I don't know. There's countless stories like that. The moment I kind of let go is the moment something changes, and like, oh, there it happened. I'm over here working like heck. And then over here, unrelated, something just comes and lands in my lap, and I, so that's kind of how the TED Talk happened. So there was no grand formula that I can offer other than be sharing and talking to people what you're building. Like that's critical because most of us don't.
Right.
We tell people in secret, or maybe our spouse knows, but just openly and unapologetically share your ideas and what you're building with people. because people tend to show up. The right people do. And so that was probably, if there was one practical thing, it's just I was talking about to everybody, telling them what I was thinking about working on, what I was building.
I watched your TED Talk twice. It's fantastic, by the way. I really love it. And
Thank you.
we'll talk more about it here shortly. But how many hours did you put in to create the content, which is, I think it's just you talking, but, and practice it and all the, what was your process?
Well, it's hard to tally the hours because it started probably 2 years before I even got the TED Talk. I signed up for a program through Bo Eason. He's out in California. He teaches entrepreneurs, business owners how to tell their personal story in a way that connect your personal story to your business. And that's when I started for the first time telling my rodeo story. And so I had spent, oh my God, countless hours writing and rehearsing and practicing these stories. And so I brought a lot of that into the TED Talk. So I already had some of the makings of stories. But from the moment I got the TED to the moment I delivered it, I would say 100 hours.
Yeah. For
like
100 hours, for 11-minute speech.
And that sounds crazy, but this was I love the creative process. And for sure there was a little bit, I think I read the book, Talk Like TED or something like, there's a TED book written by the creator of TED. It's excellent. Even if you're trying to, unrelated to TED, it's a great speaking book. So I was reading that probably this time last year. I was reading that book at the pool. And then something I'm learning with my creative process, there's just a process of accumulation, of just gathering up ideas, articles, quotes, images, and just throwing it in a box. I didn't have it was a note, Apple Notes, but the proverbial just throw it all in the box, put it on Post-it notes and throw them on the wall. And that's what I did. I had a flip chart full of I have another one because I'm working on something else right now, and I just started moving the ideas around, and then I wrote, and then the cutting started. So I wrote something and we're working through it with the coach. And it wasn't until probably 2 months before the TED Talk that the talk actually started to appear.
Right.
And that's why I like it. It appeared as I started to strip away everything that felt a little ancillary. And then all of a sudden it just was like that. Saddle your own horse. The whole talk's about that. Everything I've done is about that. So in a way, it was not just the talk, but it actually shined a light on the work I do with my clients too. That's the side benefit of a TED Talk, is it causes you to sharpen things so tight that you get clarity on your life and your business like you wouldn't otherwise have gotten. So
it's like Mark Twain's quote to his friend, sorry I wrote you a long letter. I didn't have time to write a short one.
Right. No, that's so true.
Yeah. So your TED Talk, it's interesting. So, how things come into your consciousness, and it's just that being uncomfortable. We're a culture of being comfortable, right? Like, and when I got let go of United Way, Greater Kansas City during COVID, I got into this spot where I'm like, I just want to be comfortable. I just want to be comfortable. But it led me to seeking discomfort because, Dr. Peter Attia, I think in his book, Outlive, Michael Easter, wrote, formerly of Men's Health, wrote a book on the crisis of comfort, and how, as basically they were saying, we have to, human beings are used to being uncomfortable. Like that's in our DNA. That's, just think of when they roam the jungles or whatever, searching for food, and, they're going to be killed and by, lions and so it's just interesting how people seek comfort, but really our DNA is wired to be, uncomfortable. And that's, Michael Easter talks about, whether you quit, you're an alcoholic or you want to lose weight or you want to gain muscle mass, you're going to be uncomfortable. And you touch on it and talk about a lot of different things in that, in your talk, but maybe give your comments on that, how it relates to you on your TED Talk.
Yeah, I've read the books that you mentioned too. And another one is Daniel Coyle, The Little Red Book of Talent. He breaks down what are the best of the best, what are the common ingredients and some tools. And in that book, he shares struggle as a biological necessity. And that's true. I mean, you think about like, how do we grow muscle? It's birth, you're kind of a breaking down and building up. And we live in a world today that is actually demanding less of us. we say we're burnt out, but no, I go to the HR conferences and and all we're talking about is mental health and how do we help people with their anxiety and their stress. And that's fundamentally incorrect to even try to help people with their anxiety and stress. Now, certain people need support with that, and that's something different. But when we actively try to get involved in helping people with their anxiety and stress, we're sending a message to everybody in who they are. You're somebody who needs our help. We put people in a victim position in our organizations, especially. We live in a world right now where anxiety and stress is like, we've created an intolerance to it. We're unwilling to be with the difficult emotions, and it's keeping us very unhappy and burnt out. Because I do believe, and it's so interesting, like when I did the TED Talk, there is a term for it, Boreout. We're
Right.
bored.
Yeah. Adam Grant.
Yeah,
And I,
it was that. Yeah,
yeah, you said it in your talk. I didn't know. I love Adam Grant, but it's so
yeah,
true. Like our whole society is based on, not being bored, in a general sense, because we have all this stimulation. But I know what you're talking about. It's this, you're bored at work, so you're not, whatever the stat is, almost a third of workers or two-thirds of workers are
eight,
unengaged at
eight,
work.
8 out of 10 or say they're burnout. 8 out of 10.
Yeah.
And that number's continued to go up. And what didn't make it in the TED Talk, but I believe we live in a world that we don't realize we're bored, because distraction has replaced boredom. And I think some of us need to just feel our boredom for a moment, like wake up to how bored you really are.
Right.
But we don't, because it's so convenient to reach for the cell phone, be distracted, be busy with email and be busy and distracted. Like that's something at home. Like my kids are like, I'm bored. Like, great, be bored. Like that, good things happen when we're bored.
Right.
But
Because
when
you
we're
spark
distracted,
creativity to get
nothing.
unbored.
Right. Nothing happens when we're distracted other than disease and overwhelm and busyness and burnout. So I would rather be bored than burnout, but we need to feel our own boredom and then let that inform how we can play a bigger game in our lives. And so that's really what the whole TED Talks about under the surface, is playing a bigger game, asking more of people, not less,
Right.
because that's what brings people alive. And we live in a world right now that has us afraid of doing it, but there's a way of doing it from a place of love and care. And that's ultimately what I help leaders learn to do, is show up with the heart of a servant leader, but also be a great coach, like help people see what they're capable of. There's nothing better in life but to tap into and realize what you're capable of. And as leaders, we have the opportunity to do that for our people, but we've got to get out of the way and let them saddle their own horse, let them take it on. And that's where it takes courage. And not many leaders are willing to do that and lead in that way, but I'm seeking to change that.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk about your company, Create Purpose, and what different types of leaders and people and companies you work with.
Yeah. So I primarily work with the executive teams, middle managers of large organizations. Well, medium-sized organizations, probably they're typically anywhere from 100 employees to 1,000 employees. They're either trying to skill up their team or they're trying to bring up that next level of leadership, because they notice like there's a vacuum, there's a leadership vacuum. Nobody's coming in behind us. And oftentimes the discussion starts with, who are you being as an executive team that's contributing to the lack of leadership that you're seeing? Like, because it has to start with saddle your own horse. We have to take responsibility of what's not working for us. Otherwise, you're not going to find what you're after. It always begins and ends with responsibility. But then I'm also leaning into working with sales teams, sales leaders around this idea of saddling your own horse. And this is really about creating an environment in our sales conversations where the responsibility is with our prospect. Because the truth is, we can't get people to do anything. We just can't. And we think we can, but until it's their idea, they'll never act. So if we want to create more urgency with our prospects, we've got to learn the art of coaching. How do we take an idea that's co-created together? It's not like I'm manipulating you and putting an idea in your head. It's helping the person across the table get clear on what they want, what's getting in the way of that, and then supporting them in getting what they want, whether that's with my product or not. And when you can bring that spirit, it changes the conversation, and it increases close rates and everything else, And so
Right.
it's a skill set that I'm bringing into sales, and it's what they're seeing is there's a lot of focus on problem solving in leadership and in sales. What's the problems? I have the solution. Let me help you solve your problems. And it feels good to solve problems, but I'm more interested in moving beyond problems into the world of the possibility of what if. Like that's more of a creative conversation. Problems, well, oftentimes we are the ones that created the problems in the first place, and we create them in how we're thinking about the situation. Something happens and we make it mean something, we turn it into a problem, and then we're solving the very thing we're creating. And it just puts us on this perpetual hamster wheel. It's not until we can move into a conversation of possibility. What do we want? How do we grow from this? What's the opportunity? And I think there's opportunity to do that in our sales conversations as well as within a leadership context, because then that's when we can bring our A game to the table and really make a greater contribution and do what we love to do as leaders and salespeople.
Actually, I know we've talked about saddle your own horse, and you've mentioned the phrase several times, and that's the title of your TED Talk. But I know it starts with your mom hiring a coach, and he's a combination of Bruce Wayne, Bruce Willis, and Bruce Lee, some badass, and he's going to teach you how to ride, bucking broncos and things like that. But just briefly tell this story of, where the saddle your horse comes from.
Yeah, well, the Bruce Wayne character, his name was Bruce Sturdy, and I met him at a rodeo as he rescued a bunch of people from a bull that was running down the fairway of the carnival. It got loose and was running loose. He chases after the bull, he ropes it by the horns, drags it back to the arena, and I'm watching this go down. This guy, I'm like, that was cool. Like yeah. I'm like a little boy. I'm 11 years old. I'm like, that was awesome, Mom. Well. Come to find out, she'd been talking to him and he's invited me to his ranch. I'm going to work with Bruce. He's going to teach me how to rope and work cattle and be a cowboy, And so I'm excited. Well, Mom drops me off and she leaves and Bruce tells me to go saddle my horse. And I'm like, yep, of course, I'm on it. And he leaves and then right away panic strikes. I'm like, I've never saddled my horse. My mom always saddled my horse. She's not here. Like, Bruce, I'm not going to ask Bruce to do it. No. Well, that day I figured, and I go into the TED Talk, I've saddled my own horse and I rode into the arena that day. And I was riding taller in the saddle. I was feeling like a real cowboy. And I shared this story over a glass of wine with my wife 3 years ago. And I knew I was onto something because tears were coming to my eyes. I'm telling her, I'm like, babe, that day was a defining, and I'm just because there's there was something about that moment. I really did grow up that day. And so I've brought that into a lot of my conversations. It's just saddling your own horse. It's a metaphor for being the ultimate leader of your own life. This idea of self-reliance, which is kind of lost its day in the sun. But back in the day, Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote this book, Self-Reliance. It's an essay. And it's really about standing and empowering yourself and really living life from a creative orientation. Being responsible and taking it on. And so that's what that story means to me. It represents so much more than just, saddling a horse.
Zach, I'd love to help two different groups of people on the podcast with leadership advice from great leaders like yourself. So that first group is that coming out of college, you talked about it, you didn't know what to do. What advice do you have for the recent college graduates on, how to get their first job as well as beginning their career journey?
I had somebody reach out to me and ask me this very question. He's like, I don't know what the right thing. I've got this opportunity, but what I really want to do is this. And he's like, how do I know? He asked me that question. And I told him do the one that you're going to be able to learn the most. Don't worry about your career trajectory. Don't worry about future opportunities. Go do the one where you're going to experience the most life. I like to use the metaphor being in the arena. Go put yourself in the arena. Don't do the one that's comfortable. Yeah. Don't do the one that's safe. Take the sales job that doesn't pay anything and move your butt to a city you've never been to, anybody, and figure it out. That's a recipe for success. Because you automatically put demands on yourself. You got to put demands on yourself. Put yourself in the arena, and that's my advice.
Yeah. Teddy Roosevelt wrote that poem, "The Man in the Arena." Yeah, love it.
There's a book that I would recommend to any early in your career, and it's by Cal Newport, Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. And he really debunks this myth of follow your passion. And he says what I just said, go get experiences, You won't know where this will lead, but you're going to look back 10 years from today and you're going to be like, oh my God, all you'll see is a straight line to where you are today.
Right.
But you can't know standing at the bottom of the mountain. You just got to start hiking and seeing where it takes you.
Right.
Yeah.
Love that.
Long answer, but I like that.
No,
I like that
love
question.
Yeah. So the second group, even though, and you don't have to have people underneath you in the org chart to be a leader in a company, but for those that get that first experience, now they're responsible for a team of people from an HR perspective, and they're beginning their leadership journey. What advice would you have for that group?
Really explore what it means to be a great coach. It's a tool in your tool bag as a leader, coaching, learning how to interact with your people in a way that doesn't take the responsibility away from them. How do you as a leader keep people in a position of responsibility? Because if you don't, we end up inevitably rescuing them. We think we're just helping out, but we're teaching them a way of being, and it's putting them in a victim position. We've got to teach them to saddle their own horse. And the way we do that is through the questions we learn to ask, questions that are empowering, that allow the individual to stay in the seat of the saddle, and take it on without us taking the baton from them and doing it for them. And that's a coaching skill set. I was 10 years into my leadership career before I even realized that was a thing. In fact, Todd Long's a leadership facilitator here in Kansas City. I did some work with him early on when I was back at eShipping. He offered a book called Quiet Leadership. And then Michael, who joined eShipping, the guy that came in and replaced me, he taught me this principle of servant leadership, leading from behind. Learn to experiment with that, leading from behind, because the world's going to teach us, don't ever do something that you wouldn't otherwise do yourself, and always lead out front. And there's a time and place for that. But what's even more scary is learning to lead from behind. That takes real courage. But now you become a leader that's actually like a catalyst to so many other people's lives. Like, you become a multiplier. You grow leaders around you when you're willing to do that. So that's a skill set to learn. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's worth the years of dedicating to it.
Yeah, I think it's a constant journey. I don't know if you ever fully learn it, but yeah.
Right. Agree.
Zach, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I think you're a gift to not only the Kansas City companies, but companies across the country. So thanks for coming on the Corporate Couch today.
Thanks, Jeff.
Just love talking to Zach, two-time state rodeo champion in high school and growing up. I believe he's our first guest on the Corporate Couch that has done a TED Talk. So that was great. And I'll talk about that in a second. But there's so many great things about his story. Here he is, early on employee at eShipping. There were 30 employees when he started out of college as a sales rep, cold calling, gets various promotions, becomes the VP of sales. And I think he said he had 30 direct reports. I don't know if it meant 30 direct reports or 30 people on the team, but still, he's VP of sales, reporting to the CEO, then gets demoted to what he called the sales guy. So now he's an individual contributor and he's decimated. Comes to realization that was a gift and, really changed his life in terms of what he wanted to do, be a leadership coach. He finally came around to that. But again, so many good things about his story, the side gig where he was giving it his all as the sales guy, making and exceeding his quota, but doing, about 10, 20 hours a week on this side gig of leadership coaching. So it was tremendous. Love his TED Talk, saddle your own horse, which brought back, for me, Teddy Roosevelt's rugged individualism. You got to take responsibility. You got to give people more responsibility, not less. And the whole approach to, mental health and anxiety and being bored at work. So I think he's really just great. And then he went from eShipping, he went to North Point Development Corporation in Kansas City. Great culture. He loved it. Basically gave him a 3-year plan to say, I'll work here for 3 years, but I'm going to work on my side gig. They were smart in letting him do that. And after 3 years, he was at an inflection point where he said, I love this culture. I love being here. But he goes, I got to do my own thing 100% of the time. So it was a tough decision. The other thing, gets into the woo-woo or, believing in God or the God whisperer or the universe. But he said, the more I just let things happen versus trying to force things to happen, the more he let go, of letting things happen, the more things happen to him, that were great in terms of moving his business and getting more clients. So just so many great things. And his TED Talk, I think he said, it's hard to count the hours, but an 11-minute TED Talk, I think conservatively said, I probably put in 100 plus hours. So just really good. Joe, what'd you take out of the episode?
Yeah, giving a TED Talk is on my bucket list. I would love to be able to do that. Unfortunately, I don't have a topic that anybody's interested in, and I'm not real good at that kind of speaking, so that's kind of disqualifying me for it. I'm totally interested in anybody that has done a TED Talk and has gone through that and been successful with it, and so I think that's great. You already talked a little bit about the fact that he was vice president of sales, and then they essentially took his job away from him and demoted him down to being an individual contributor again. That actually happened to me twice. I'm not going to give the details because I'm not going to dox any of the companies that it happened at. But in two distinct situations in my career, I had developed a department underneath me, and I was managing people, and I thought I was doing a good job. And then I get called into my boss's office for something and discovered, nope, they are taking away all the people from me, and they're not firing me because they think that I'm valuable to the organization, but I can do any job I want to. I just can't be a manager of people. And that happened to me twice over a span of 10, 15 years. It's interesting to see what our reactions would be. But in both of our cases, both with me and Zach, there was a little bit of incredulity. Like what? I can't believe that you would actually say that, because that was certainly what I said. But then he turned around and he said, I'm going to show you. And he turned around and found himself to be a successful entrepreneur as a result. I, on the other hand, went the other direction. I said, well, I'm going to show you. That happened to me once. And then when it happened again, it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe there is something about this. And I finally had to resign myself to the life of being a individual contributor. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to be the best darned individual contributor that you could possibly have in this role. And that's how I ended up my career. The lesson there is that there are many different pathways. And boy, we've seen this multiple times in the interviews we've done. There's many different pathways to people's successes in life. And I consider myself as having a reasonably successful career, but I had two bumps in the road. Zach had several bumps in his road, but he's certainly been successful in his career also. There are different paths to everybody's success, and your job is to discover your own path.
100%. And, you and I have worked together 4 different times in the corporate America world, 3 divisions of Sprint, now T-Mobile, and then Boehringer Ingelheim. And we've talked about this and over many of the episodes with the guests on the Corporate Couch. And it is, you don't have to have people assigned to you in an org chart to be a leader. Mm-hmm. Knowing you, Joe, and more, like you did so many innovative things on your own to make things better, faster. And that's being a leader, right? You're taking the initiative, that saddle your own horse, right? Taking responsibility. And so I love it.
Well, I appreciate that.
What leadership advice would you want to impart on our great audience today, Joe?
We are going to go to that great philosopher, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who for some reason has 3 names that I never have figured out why. And Dr. Tyson one time said, does it disturb anyone else that the Los Angeles Angels baseball team translates into the Angels?
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.